Well, hello pen fans. Brian Goulet here from Goulet Pens, doing another relaxing style video, this time showing off Jacques Herbin, Emerald of Chivor. And to match, one of my all-time favorite pens, the TWSBI 580 ALR Prussian Blue. Now I thought these two would be a good match together. And I'm also going to use the Rohrer & Kleiner glass pen as well as the Kakimori stainless steel dip nib. So this should be an interesting video. Give you a variety of writing experiences. So the 580, if you're not familiar with this pen, it's a piston filling pen. The color matches the ink quite well. This is one of the more popular colors. And, you know, the piston mechanism is smooth. And it does have, it's an ALR, so it does have these little ribbed, whoop, hey, there we go. Just thought I would let that pen jump a little bit. It's got a piston mechanism, double wall piston seal, holds a pretty good volume of ink. And the nice thing about TWSBI is they include this wrench, so you can actually remove the piston. It makes it easier to clean, especially if you don't like having to clean by moving the piston up and down. You can put the wrench on like this. You don't put the piston all the way down, but most of the way. And then you spin it in a clockwise motion like I'm doing here, and it just pulls right out. And ideally, the piston will stay locked in the mechanism. If it's not, it's a little tougher to get it back in order. And the reason I like doing this is when it comes time to clean it, you can grab a bulb syringe. So you grab this bulb syringe and you can flush. You fill it with water and you just flush it through, just like you would a cartridge converter pen. You know, by taking the piston out too, especially with a shimmering ink like this, you can get a cotton swab in there. You can sort of swab it out. Makes it very convenient for cleaning. So I think this is actually a great pairing. TWSBI, whether it's a 580 or an Eco, I think it works really well for shimmering. And then when you want to put it back, you just insert it in there and you put it counterclockwise, and that screws it down. You just kind of tighten it gently. You don't have to ratchet it way down on there. Yeah, there you go. And, you know, I have a fine nib on this pen, but I'm thinking about maybe swapping it out and putting a different nib on it later. Gives you a little variety of writing experiences. So here we go. Let's go ahead and start unboxing here. So Jacques Herbin, they've been making ink for a very long time. This ink is part of their 1670 collection. And I like to open these from the bottom because they have, the top is sealed. So I'll get out my pocket knife here and very gently, carefully use that to pry open the bottom. And, you know, because I know I'm going to get asked, this is a Benchmade S30V that I got probably a decade ago from my in-laws as a Christmas gift. So when you open it from the bottom like this, you are greeted with the bottom of the bottle, obviously. Unlike the last video that I did, the Kyanite du Nepal, where the bottle was upside down in the packaging, this one is correct. And it's a beautiful bottle. I love the look of it. You got the wax seal. And on the bottom, you can actually see some settling out from the shimmer. So that's kind of neat. So before you start using this, what you need to do is give it a gentle shaking. You don't want to shake it violently and get a whole bunch of bubbles in the ink. But just gently like this, kind of back and forth, you know, maybe a little more aggressive than what I'm doing right now, just so you're not sitting here for 10 minutes. But you should be able to only see the darker ink and not any of that shimmer kind of shining back at you. That's when you know you've gotten it all kind of in suspension. And when you kind of, there we go, now we're talking. So when you get rid of all of that there, you're then able to know that you've got a pretty even dispersion of the shimmer in there. And then you ink it up and you can get it evenly in your pen. Now I love the top here. This is wax. It is kind of soft, so, you know, the wax on the front here as well as the top, you know, it can crack over time. I've had that happen. It's nothing to worry about. It's just ink, but the presentation looks really nice to start. And you can already see just from 30 seconds or so that shimmer is starting to settle out. Now, it's not all of it. There's still plenty in there. but you definitely want to give it a shaking pretty much right before you go to ink up your pen if you want to really get the most even shimmer dispersion that you can. So you unscrew the cap, and you just kind of set that aside. It's got a nice wide opening. If you have any of these inks from way long ago, they used to have a much narrower opening, but this is good. So you just take the piston, put it all the way down, and on this pen you do need to submerge the whole nib up to the grip. And the only annoying thing about doing this on this particular pen is the very small ridges on the grip. It means that it's going to hold a little bit of ink on there. So I just use the piston, and it gets it pretty well full, but I don't know, I feel kind of inspired to maybe max out the filling. That'd be kind of interesting to show you if you haven't seen that before. It's really easy to do on this pen, especially because it's a demonstrator. So, I tried just filling it again, but there's still a little bit of air in there. So I'm turning it upside down so that the air is at the top, and then I'm using the piston to push the ink up to remove all of the air. And then as soon as I start to see some ink come out where the feed is right there, then I know there's no air left. So I take it and put it back in the ink, put the piston back up, and voila, no air inside the pen whatsoever. So I've got a maxed out filling, which gets me, around 2 milliliters of ink. But as you can see here, it's got some ink on the grip section, so I've got to take care of that. I just keep a paper towel beside me, which I've, clearly reused from previous inkings. Now there is just a little bit of ink still, I've noticed, even if you try to wipe it off. With these 580 ALRs, it's the one kind of drawback to this grip. Aside from the texture, if you're not into that. So what I do is I just take a little water, get it on a paper towel or a cotton swab or something, and that helps to pull any of that extra ink out of the ridges on the grip. I'm still getting ink on my fingers, but, I'm also playing a lot with these more than you will when you're just doing a normal filling. And I'll wipe off the top of the bottle as well, just so that I don't have any extra ink in places that I don't need it. So I set that aside. I've got my fully loaded pen. Now I think we're ready to write. So I'm going to take it. Remember, this is a fine stainless steel nib. I'm just going to dab it up, and oh yeah, we're ready to go. We're pretty primed. So I'll start writing here, and ooh, hello. I got a little blob of ink there. Not ideal, obviously. You don't want your pen to kind of blob like that, but this really is a result of me doing kind of the overfilling, right? That's not normally going to happen if you're just doing a regular filling. It's because I took all the air out of it that you possibly could. So the feed was completely loaded with ink. And here we go. Now this is writing a little more like what I expect. It was kind of gushing out of there before. This is more what a fine TWSBI nib should write like. So I'm just going to leave that little blob on there. We're going to see, especially because you got shimmer. I want to see what it does as it dries. So I'm just going to do some sample writing here. I've got the TWSBI 5, not the 508, the 580. There we go. Well, that could look better, but I want to see that blob dry out. So whatever I end up writing here is just what we're going to work with today. Now this is called Prussian Blue, of course. And it's really like a teal color, which I like. Stainless steel, fine nib going on here. I'll do some X's just so I can see some shading if there's any to be drawn out of it. Now the fine nib, it's going to look pretty consistent. Not a lot of shading, not a whole ton of sheen probably. This is an ink that does sheen. So this is Jacques Herbin, Emerald of Chivor. Love this ink. It is just one of my favorites. What I really like about this ink, for one, it's dark, so it stands out a lot. It flows nicely. It's a pretty wet ink, and I like that. It has some sheen. It has some shimmer, but it's not too much. You can definitely have too much sometimes with these properties of ink, but it's nothing crazy. So we're going to see if that comes out, but the fine nib is really not going to draw output so much. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to go grab another TWSBI, and we're going to swap these nibs. And we're back. So I grabbed another TWSBI 580 ALR out of my collection. This is the special edition from 2020. This is the, what is it called? Let's see if I can remember the name. Punch Pink. That's what it is, Punch Pink. And I'm going to swap this out. Now, because the grip is kind of a sleeve on these pens, I can actually just, keep the sleeve and get kind of a multi-color look going on, but we're not going to do that today. So I've taken the broad nib that was on my Punch Pink, and I've now put the Prussian Blue grip on it, reinstalled it, and now I have a broad nib. Of course, this ink now is, this feed now is completely dry. So I'm going to push the piston down just a little bit to saturate the feed, get some ink flowing through it again, because again, the previous nib I inserted into the bottle when I filled it, so it got saturated. So here I just flood the feed a bit until I start to see the ink, and then I suck it back up. That means I've now got ink flowing. And this is a broad nib, so it's going to be wetter. So I'll kind of set those parts aside. I'll reassemble and swap out my stuff again. There we go. I'll just kind of put that together so I don't lose it, because I do have a tendency to dismantle a lot of pens and then leave their parts everywhere. It makes a bit of a mess for me after I'm done recording. But anyway, here we go. Make sure the flow is good. Oh, yep, it's pretty much primed and ready to go. I like to do these little dots, and then, just kind of some gentle writing there just to see if the ink is primed and at the tip and ready to go, which it is here. So now, this is a broad nib that we've got now, so you're really going to be able to see the difference between the fine and the broad on this TWSBI. And this ink in particular, I think, will show the difference pretty well, because it is kind of a wetter ink. It is one that, does get darker a bit the heavier you put it down. And it's definitely noticeable between the fine and the broad. I mean, you have a medium in between these, so if you wanted a compromise between the two, the broad, I will say, this is a bit much for this 5mm dot ruling. You really want a fine nib if you're going to be using, if you're going to be using it this much. And you see the difference there, especially when doing the scribble at the end there, trying to really flood it. You can see quite a difference. But it writes really well. Both nibs are very smooth. The flow is consistent. Flow is good. And actually you can see, even just as I had the pen kind of sitting there, it's really well for shimmering ink, because you have this insert in the cap, which helps to seal up the pen well, which is nice. And then you've got that clear body, which shows off the ink well, not only for your ink level, but you can actually see the shimmer in there too. So I'm going to leave that there for just a minute, and we're going to see as the shimmer kind of settles out even in the pen. It's pretty cool. So now we're going to try using the glass tip pen. However, I realized I haven't shaken it yet. So yeah, if you look at that, look at how much of that shimmer settled out, even just, in the 12 minutes or so as we've been kind of sitting here. So I'm going to give it a gentle shaking until all that's there. And you see it goes into suspension a lot easier because, not all of it settled out, of course. But especially for the glass pen, I want to really show a pretty even amount. So, it is something that if you're writing with a glass pen a lot, you're going to need to stop every now and then and maybe shake out the ink. So here we go. Oh my goodness, is this wet? Holy cow. Now this is a pretty wet ink, but it is not wanting to hang out in the pen. It wants to just kind of gush right out of there. Now this is glass pens, they're not the most consistent thing. They're handmade. And oh yeah, wow, look at that. It's putting down a lot. Now this is cool because it will show a lot more of the shimmer and sheen. But you're going to have to dip this a lot more often because it's, maybe to be able to get a few words out. But yeah, it's probably not my most ideal one. So I'm just going to kind of clean it out. Just kind of shake it in some water, wipe it off, set it aside. Now we're going to try the Kakamori. So the flutes on the Kakamori are a little finer than what you have on the glass pen here. So I'm anticipating maybe a little more control, maybe a little more consistency. But with dip pens in general, I'm going to go ahead and shake this up again a little bit. Oh, there we go. Settled out again. Now with dip pens in general, they are less consistent. That is just how they are, especially with fountain pen ink. If you're using calligraphy ink, it's better because it's a little thicker. It hangs out more on the nib. But fountain pen ink, it's made for fountain pens. It's not exactly made for dip pens, not for consistency. But here we go. I'll hold it at a steeper angle, and ooh, it's still writing really wet. Now this Kakamori nib, the lower down your writing angle, the more ink it puts down. So I'm writing with it pretty steep here, and it's still coming out fairly wet. Finer than the glass pen, so but and you can just see it looks a little different. So there we go, and you can see when I really want to kind of paint it on there, it's a lot easier to do that. Oh, I think I might have used up most of what's in there, so I'm going to dip this again. Put some more down. Ooh, yeah, there we go. Now we're talking. So the Kakamori, it's kind of thing, like I think it's really good for artwork. For daily writing, regular writing, it's not necessarily my favorite, but I think it's really good if you want to change colors a lot. This is where I use up the dip pens and the glass pens and things like that, especially for videos like these. Same thing as cleaning the glass pen. I kind of dip it in there and wipe out the excess, and it's in pretty good shape. The ink hasn't dried on there or anything, so it comes off pretty easy. So yeah, I'll wipe off the ink on the bottle again, set that aside for a second. So there we go. Now you can see, the difference a little bit. Definitely, it's, the more ink you put down, the darker it's going to look, the more shimmer and potentially sheen that you're going to see. And, as these glass pens and dip pens, it's very evident that you're going to get more of the unique properties of the ink the more of it you put down, which is not unusual. Paper has a lot to do with it too. So the more ink resistant the paper that you use, the more those properties are going to come out as well. Well, there we have it, folks. Kind of looking at it again as we've had a minute for it to dry, I can see that the blob there, a lot more shimmer that comes out of that, of course. It's not fully dry, but it's close. Looking at the fine nib, I really don't see a lot of sheen. I really don't see a lot of shimmer. It's the kind of thing that in order to get those, you need really smooth paper. You need just sheer volume of ink on the page. So the less ink it's putting down, the less those characteristics come out. Now, for me, that works really well because I don't always want that. But when you do, you use that broad nib, and then it's like, hello. Those features start to come out, and you really can get some of the more unique properties. I get a little more shading, of course, as well as I can put more ink down. And the glass pen, I gotta be honest, I'm not thrilled the most with how these have turned out. Now, granted, I have less experience using these, so there could be some technique, but it really goes on way heavier, especially on the glass pen to start. And the issue with that, I think, is as I'm writing with the glass pen, I think maybe the shimmer is coming out heavier at the start. Same thing with the Kakamori. So it starts out really shimmery, and then it really lessens up quite a bit. So the shimmer doesn't look as consistent, even shaking it and stuff like that. So it's really interesting. That's a property that, is kind of unique to work around with dip pens, is the shimmer, inconsistency that you may experience depending on, the type of ink and all that. But for the 580, oh, here we go. Yeah, look at that. You can see the shimmer even kind of settling down in the pen there as it's sitting there. So don't be shocked at all when you don't use the pen for a while. You're going to need to kind of shake it up a little bit, even as you're writing with it, to keep it dispersed. I find if you keep the pen moving, that helps a lot. You kind of shake it back and forth, or what I like to do is just kind of rotate it within my hand. And that keeps the shimmer kind of moving around. and depending on how much you write, how fast you write, you may kind of shake it up enough even just as you're writing with it normally. But little tips there for writing with a shimmering ink like this. All around, I think it's a great ink because it's very versatile. It has shimmer, it has some sheen, but you don't have to have it if you don't want it. Depends on your nib choice, your paper choice. I'm really happy with this choice all around. It's a great matching, great pairing for ink and pen, and I hope you all have enjoyed this today.